So I've been giving some thought to religion in the world of Greyhawk, and I'd like to talk about making it more messy today on Greyhawk Blog. In the real world, religion is a messy thing. It's not nearly as organized and as cut and dried and homogenized as it is in a role-play game like Dungeons and Dragons or a setting like the world of Greyhawk. And this is a natural thing because when you're designing a game, you need to make things as easy for the game master as possible. So overloading with tons and tons of variations and things like that isn't really practical unless you want to devote an entire book to it. And even then, it's still going to be kind of reductionist because it's impossible to lay out every single little difference and such between cults and so forth. But uh, if you want to add a little bit more reality to your fantasy world, you can add some of these messy elements to religion, and I think it really goes a long way towards making a fantasy setting come alive and seem more real to the players. And a great example of this is Greyhawk. Now, in the real world, you'll see, for example, temples, churches in New York City. Just take an example. Catholic churches in New York City. There's going to be a church of various saints all over the place. Sometimes multiple churches of the same saint. You're going to see churches named after a particular event in Jesus's life, or even Jesus's mother's life, or whatever. There's all kinds of different variations and emphases and so forth in the names. Now, in the Catholic Church, things are more homogenized in terms of doctrine and ritual. But earlier on in medieval history and in late antiquity, that wasn't the case at all. You would have all kinds of different variations of doctrine, and people were still experimenting with different ritual forms and so forth. So you could bring that into your world of Greyhawk. And we see this a little bit in one very clear example, and that is Foltus, Foltus of the Blinding Light. And obviously, Foltus is a god that is worshipped in the theocracy of the Pale. That's where he's most famously worshipped. But he's found all throughout the Flaness. And we're told that there are bits of doctrine that aren't universally held by the worshippers of Foltus. Specifically, we know that some of his worshippers say that he put the sun and stars and moons in their orbits and dictated, how they should go in the heavens. But we're told that's not universally accepted as a doctrine. And we also know that the religion of Foltus, as it's practiced in the theocracy of the Pale, is different than it is in other places. In the theocracy of the Pale, they kind of emphasize the lawful neutral aspect of Foltus at the expense of the lawful good aspect of Foltus, which is seen in other places. So in the theocracy of the Pale, you get a more rigid, organizationally hidebound religion, whereas outside of the Pale, you're going to see something that emphasizes the aspects of good more than pure law. So you do start to see those things. But if you can introduce those variations in other religions as well, I think you're going to really see your campaign come to life because players are going to be able to kind of cue in, say, "Oh yeah, that's right. We're in Kale Land now, so here the worshippers of Olamandara do this as opposed to the Wild Coast where they do that." Um, and something else you could do is to have uh, temples and churches that are dedicated to a specific event in a deity's mythological life. So, for example, we know about the legend of how Olamadara got his terrapin shell. And you could have a temple of Olamadara of the shell or whatever, that would emphasize that. It wouldn't be the only thing they ever talk about, but, it would be named after that event in the deity's life. And that would be a way of differentiating one from another. They might not even have any doctrinal uh, differences in doctrine, but they could have that, just that subtle differentiation to make it stand out a little. And there's all kinds of different variations you could do in terms not only of doctrine but also of practice. And there's just to take an example. Let's take the example of Ilona of the Forest. the goddess of forests and animals and so forth. In one place, she might be, her followers might be more druidic than they are clerical. So you would see, their priesthood would be more druids and so forth, and in another place, the priesthood might be more clerics. That's a simple way to delineate that, and you can do that same thing for Abad High and a couple other deities too. Hi, everybody. Please help me keep Greyhawk alive by liking this video and subscribing. It really does help. You can also become a member of the channel or support me on Patreon and get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free or at-cost copies of my Greyheim Adventures modules, and more. Thanks. And now back to the show. And you can also have a lot of fun with this. You could, if you have a cleric PC who comes from a certain place and he travels to another place and then goes to a temple of his god, he might run into some local problems because, his beliefs are slightly at variance with the beliefs of the locals. You can also have local deities, the deities and practices that are local to a particular village or a particular valley or whatever, that go beyond the religious strictures that you're going to find across the Flness. So you could have let's say a valley, and this is based on a real world example, where you have a group of people who engage in sort of an astral battle on a regular basis to try to keep their crop safe. It's something that only happens there, and it's religious in mechanism, but it has, it's just a local thing that they do, and to them it's a natural part of their religion, even though somebody coming from outside that valley isn't going to know anything about this because they've grown up with this for generations. This is just what you do as a worshiper of, for example, um, Hieronius. If you're faithful to Hieronius, you're going to help this astral battle every month or whatever. And that to them it's the most natural thing in the world because they assume that, of course, everybody has to do this. Somebody coming in from outside, because some places can be quite insular. Somebody coming from outside might not be able to, might not recognize this and wonder what the heck's going on, and maybe even think that they're being heretical or whatever. There's all kinds of different ways you can play into this and have it impact your game. It doesn't have to be the center point of an adventure. It can just be kind of a way of um, differentiating one locale from another. And, in the same way that you might describe houses in one area of the Flness differently than you do in another. And that's kind of a mental cue for the players. You can do the same thing with cultural and religious things. And, by making these local variations of things that are supposed to be familiar to the players, it gives them something to play off of, in terms of role playing. It also gives them the cues to remember where they are. That's not their home base. So anyway, I hope you've found this interesting. I'd love to hear your examples or ideas if you've ever done anything like this with local variations of religion. Please let me know in the comments. Hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to you all later. Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.